Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about Gemini Rising Man, about Gemini Rising in general, Gemini Rising Men, and this was actually inspired by a movie entitled Gemini Man, as many of you may have heard of. I don't know if it's a blockbuster hit or what its ratings are or what's going on with it exactly, but I know it's a movie that stars Will Smith, renowned actor Will Smith. And I thought it was interesting. One day when I saw the title for the movie Gemini Man, I was just wondering if he might have had some Gemini prominent in his chart. And what happened was, if I had remembered right, I thought Will Smith had a Leo ascendant based on what I researched previously. I knew his moon and sun were not in Gemini, as he has a Scorpio moon, I believe, and his sun is in Libra. And I said, okay, I'm just going to look at the chart anyway, just for the heck of it, just in case. So when I looked at the chart, he has Gemini rising. And as I've stated in previous videos, I do believe that a lot of actors and actresses, consciously, if not subconsciously at times, are drawn to roles that do correspond with their astrological energies. Now, Will Smith may have been no exception. Now, in some cases, somebody made a good point when I was talking about another actor that had been maybe connected with a role that might have fit something in his astrological chart, said that something, maybe the director might be picking up on the astrological energy that the at least on the subconscious level of the actor or actors in or the actor in that example, but that could apply in other cases. But in this particular, I thought it was interesting, inspired me to talk about in the movie Gemini Man. Will Smith plays somebody that is, I believe he's fighting, he has to combat this other person is like a stronger, younger version of himself or something. And very interesting how astrology can have a sense of humor and that we can have roles that can be connected with our astrological charts one way. But going back to Gemini rising man, I mean, I can remember in the in the book and about Gemini rising, and talking about the true duality. Something about when Jean Avery had wrote it, she said something like the true duality is really man's need to be objective and close at the same time. I thought that was very interesting, very profound, very good point. Gemini rising is, people with Gemini rising really, they could be obviously hard to pin down on a figurative standpoint, from a mental standpoint, in terms of, like, say, having to be somewhere at a certain time. But it's funny that sometimes it seems like it can apply physically as well. I had a friend of mine that has Gemini rising, and some of you may have heard this in a previous story that I talked about in at least one other video, if not more, that I can remember. He was a Gemini moon and Gemini ascendant person, and there were two kids. This was in the middle school. They were trying to actually pin him down. They were wrestling with him. They were on top of him, and my Gemini moon rising friend did kind of a quick push-up jolt that knocked the two people off of him. I thought that was very symbolic of Gemini energy, not wanting to be pinned down. And those are, I mean, it almost like was fitting the statement, even though when people talk about Gemini not wanting to be pinned down, they're really talking about more of a figurative standpoint. But it was almost like that was demonstrated physically as well to really be symbolic of the fact that Gemini can has a hard time being pinned down. And I've noticed the common thing, what I've noticed with Gemini rising people is, again, going back to the Rising Sign book by Jean Avery, where it states in the book something about, Gemini, could be a tricky matter, dealing with a tricky Gemini rising, and something about having the ability to outmaneuver, outsmart, and outthink others. And it's amazing how many Gemini rising people I will see that actually, they actually demonstrate that. It could be in a movie where they're actually playing somebody that's outmaneuvering people somehow, or it's in some other capacity. Like this person, I was going to say, on a sports level, I thought was interesting. I mean, it talk about, Gemini Rising again being able to outmaneuver people based, what I was reading from the Rising Sign book by Gene Avery. He talked about Jeff Fisher, who was a former NFL coach, and he coached the Titans for a number of years. And I mean, he pretty much outmaneuvered head coach Tony Dungy in one moment. It was a game, I believe it was 2006. They were playing the eventual Super Bowl champion Indianapolis Colts at the time. And what happened was, what Jeff Fisher, I believe it was him that he decided to do, he decided to cause some chaos and confusion on the football field. He had a number of players keep coming on and off, and it forced the Colts to take a timeout. What happened as a result of the Indianapolis Colts taking a timeout, they had one less timeout they were able to use, therefore, and at the end of the game, when it would be more of a critical juncture of the game when they actually needed it. Now, the thing about, Gemini Rising as well, going back to being able, to outmaneuver, outwit people, whatever, there was another, I've seen at least one movie with at least one person that has Gemini Rising in real life be showing this ability to be, the art of trickeration and outsmarting others. There was a movie with Peter Fonda, a Gemini Rising, where he was, what happened was he had these people, I think it might have been like Ku Klux Klan people, were chasing him and his group, and his friends, of family, whatever, for during the movie. And what happened was they were like on top of his camper, some vehicle he was on, and Peter Fonda comes out of the vehicle and he goes on top of it while it's driving. And what happens is one of those people that were chasing him in the movie were on top of the vehicle as well. And what Peter Fonda did was he just said hey. He said hey to the guy that was on top of the vehicle. And what happened was the guy winds up, he looks up. And right after he looks up, he hits like this bridge or viaduct or something, and he gets knocked off the vehicle. I mean, right there, that shows, it's like it's showing that Gemini Rising energy to outsmart and outthink others. Even though this was an actor's role, as I stated before, I do believe strongly that these actors and actresses are strongly connected with roles that, at least on a conscious or if not subconscious level, in some cases, that do correspond with their astrological energy in their chart. And it's just amazing how this actually how this actually works out. And the thing about Gemini Rising people as well is the fact that they are people that you could be on your own plane. You could be thinking about one thing and you're still pondering something. You're contemplating or thinking about one stage of something, and Gemini has already ascended to step 2 or step 3 when you're still thinking about step 1. And I mean, the fact that they can move with such lightning speed, it's not even funny. I can remember there was one moment with another Gemini Rising friend I had. What happened was I was sitting down. We were sitting down under my, it was like a awning or something at my grandma's place at one time by the garage, and we were talking for a little bit. My grandmother was out there talking with us, and what happened was apparently my grandmother's vehicle, it was in the driveway, but the driveway was on like an incline or a decline, however you look at it. The car started to roll backwards, and the Gemini Rising friend of mine was already, I'm doing everything but basically maybe blinking a couple times, and he's already running, sprinting to the vehicle, getting ready to open the front door of the driver's side and getting ready, I guess, to put his foot on the brakes or something. But the car did slow down and stop anyway. But the thing about it is, it's just what impresses me with Gemini Rising, the Gemini Rising Man, is that they are so, they're so quick-witted, so fast. They have very quick-witted, facile mentality, and that's what really the experience when you're dealing with Gemini Rising is that you're dealing with, of course, a lot of versatility expressed very outwardly. They're always about a lot of variety. They disdain monotony, of course, and those are some things I wanted to talk about as far as the Gemini Rising Man goes. And again, I was inspired to do this video because when I saw the movie with Will Smith and being in Gemini Rising and being in the movie Gemini Man, I thought it was very, but it's very uncanny the way that worked out. And I ponder whether Will Smith actually knows his chart or if he knows he has Gemini Rising. But I think when you're talking about when you think about it, it just really it's just unbelievable. And I could only imagine what his reaction would be if somebody were to approach him and he'd say he wasn't even cognizant, say he was completely oblivious to his astrological chart, and somebody said, Will Smith, I understand you're in the movie Gemini Man, but your rising sign in your chart is Gemini. And if they explained that to him and they were able to elaborate or elucidate on or what have you, explain what it meant to have Gemini rising, I think he'd be pretty astounded. I think it's really interesting the way that works out. But really, that's pretty much a lot of just based on my experiences with Gemini rising people are about. So basically, that's what I wanted to get at with this video, people. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. And until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.